Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Mission Impossible from 1996. So, I would honestly say that I don't hold spy movies in very high regard. Even though more than likely at some point there would probably be a plethora of different spy movies probably reviewed within this channel. Um, but yeah, I just very few of these kinds of films just because eventually they either get boring or they get way too complex or eventually they just go on and don't bother to write them very well or eventually just kind of plop out the villain or eventually have no real surprises to where you're just kind of left going, huh, well, that is what that is. So, and plus like a James Bond film where they've kind of spun those out so many times where it's just like, okay, like how can these movies get really any better at this point? Just because like they've kind of spiraled them into the ground. But anyways, but a lot of people will probably like a lot of James Bond movies, and that's okay. Especially even the last one where Daniel Craig was to retire and so on and so forth until eventually they make another one. Anyways, so moving on. So let's talk about Mission Impossible. So we have it to where like John Voight is in this movie, and I can't help but say that for this movie that we have a mission that leads to another mission that leads to another mission that leads to another mission. And so we have it to where eventually Ethan Hunt is to eventually have every single one of his former team members seemingly killed off to eventually at some point in this story find otherwise, and then Ethan is to eventually want to clear his name, and so he is to go out of his way to go to Langley to download the knock list in a heavily secured location to then, of course, turn around and try and sell this information, but to arrest all the people that are actually involved in all of this. Job, Max, so on, so forth. And eventually get in good with MI5 or really Kittredge, who is going on and telling at one point Ethan what to do. So, really, that's kind of like the quickest like tee up of this movie. Grading wise, I would have to say Mission Impossible is a good, if not better than good movie. Like I would probably have to say like I struggle to say that this is a great film just because my grading is heavily skewed because normally this is a spy film. Um I enjoy this movie even though it's kind of a dry film at points. It's a very kind of slow approaching kind of film, but like probably out of all the other movies, I like this one the most. But I don't know. Eventually, I'll go on and watch maybe the other Mission Impossible films if it seems like this one is to be trending enough for whatever reason, or any number of other Mission Impossible movies are trending enough, and kind of see how eventually I feel about those. For how I'm thinking that, oh yeah, I can probably review any number of those other ones when eventually they get way more complex and crazily just exhausting to watch. But anyways, so with that said, uh, really I can just say that at the end of the day, uh, this of course is to tie into a list of people who are to have code names and then are to have real names, and they are agents who are all in the field. And so this would kind of come off as Captain America Winter Soldier when eventually all the list of all the agents are to eventually give up who they are and have all these names being presented on the internet. And like it's kind of like the same thing within this movie, but they're trying to protect this list of all these agents. And because at some point, if they are to be found out, they are to immediately be killed. So yeah, that's the whole secrecy of it all. But anyways, let's go on and let's just go into spoilers. No matter what I say, like I feel like the more that I talk about this movie cryptically, the more I'm just gonna like just be like, I don't know. Yeah, like really, this is just a movie built on missions, and we go on and have to have Ethan, who is to consistently win people over, and eventually put the pieces together of what is really going on or what had really gone on, because Ethan is very observant. So with that said, let's go into that double five time territory. Let's just go into spoilers because I don't know what to say for the freaking cryptic like sense of this. I give up. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time we can do spoil this movie. So we first begin in Kev, and so we of course have a guy who is to be looked on through cameras and tech by a guy named Jack, who is actually Emilio Estevez in this movie. And Jack is going on and looking at uh, a a screen that is to have a guy named Gennady Zoziva or Zozimov. So we go on and we have Zozimov, who is to be talking to his godfather, and he has no clue of what had happened, because he of course is in a room with a girl who is to be called Claire, and she of course is knocked out, and he is to have blood all over his chest. And so Zozimov is to go on and tell his godfather that there is a contact in Minsk named Dmitry Mienlov. And so we go on and we have this godfather who is to give Zazimov this drink, and he then passes out. And then we go on and we have it to where the godfather is to reveal his face to be really Ethan. And so we also have Jack, who is on this computer, like hoping that eventually this name was going to be heard, so that way when Claire is to wake up, because she's been under for too long, like hopefully he'll get the information by the time that Claire really wakes up, because Claire, I guess, is to fake her death. So Ethan is to go on and wake up Claire, and so Claire is saying to Ethan, it's like, well, hey, do we get it? Like, did we get the information? And Ethan's like, well, yeah, of course we did. And so Claire is like, okay, great. So we go on and they drug up this guy and ship him off to wherever they ship him off to. And since the mission is over, they go on and their mission is wrapped. Like, that's all they had to do is get this one bit of intel. So we now have it to where we have Jim Phelps, who is on this plane going on and is to eventually have this stewardess go on and want to give him a movie or a certain thing of cinema. And so Jim is like, I'm not really interested in movies. I'm more of a theater guy. And so the steward is like, well, would you like some like theatrical stuff from the Ukraine? And Jim is like, well, how about you go on and you give me something, and like I'll like, how about you choose and I'll take it in. So we go on and we have this woman who is to give this man this tape, and so Jim is to go on and play this, and so this is to basically be his very next mission, whether he chooses to accept it or not. So we have Kittredge going on and telling Jim that he is to uh, go on and be involved in a mission that is to be done in Prague. We have a man who, of course, is to be Alexander Golitskin, and he, of course, is to be a traitor. So I'm going to end up calling this guy Alexander because I'm not even going to try to pronounce that last name consistently. So Alexander is to be a traitor. We realize that. So it seems that Alexander is to be trying to make his way into the Prague embassy to try and steal this knock list that is to have Alexander supposedly already have half the knock list, which is just all the code names, and then the other half will be all the real legit names that tie into all of the code names. So all these agents will eventually be found out about and will be killed. So we have it to where the the team that is to be selected is, of course, a team that Jim has consistently worked with before. We of course have Jack. We of course have Sarah, Davy. We have Hannah. We have Ethan, of course, who is to be the point man. We have Claire, that is to actually be Jim Phelps's wife, and that I believe is to be it. So we have it, of course, where everybody is to go on and meet up at Prague because Ethan and the rest and his team are to be in Kiev, so they have to go on and take a flight to make their way to Prague. So we have everybody go on and meet at this certain location, and so Jim is going on and relaying this message to all these people about kind of what they're going to do, make their way to this embassy. And so we go on and we have it to where Ethan is going to be out in the open under disguise as some Senator Waltz guy who I guess is to be a chair of the Armed Service Committee hearing. Great. So as well as it seems that this Senator Waltz is to go on and do this interview within this film, to where, of course, we have Ethan who can kind of watch this guy's mannerisms, as we really have it to where Tom Cruise in this movie is technically playing that role in that interview, so that way he can look the same as this character. And we end up going into the later Mission Impossible movies where we have these kind of voice things that end up getting put on people's necks, as well as eventually people looking a lot more like other people in this film, instead of going on and having to consistently try to pull off like Tom Cruise looking basically like the Nutty Professor and being a number of different people. So, anyways, so we go on and we have it to where Hannah is to be this girl who's to kind of observe from above, going on and watching as Alexander is to make his way through this embassy, and we have Jack who is to be placed in this elevator where he is to go on and hack through and eventually give certain access to both Ethan's character, the senator, and both Sarah Davy. So, and we just have it to where Claire is to like Claire and both Hannah are, or no wait, we have, I think, Claire who's just to be the wheelman when eventually they get out of there. So, and it seems that Sarah Davy is to also have like this access to this place, as she is to be this kind of governor or senator's assistant. So eventually she'll be there also because she has access. So, anyways, so we have Ethan and Jack giving Jim Phelps crap, John Voight's character, about how I'm sure they like they set him up in probably the best hotels uh, when he was on location, and so Ethan was saying like, well, hey, where did they set you up with? Did they set you up at the plaza? Where else did they set you up with? And Jim mentions that he was actually just set up in the Drake Hotel in Chicago, and they're like, like some pretty swanky, some pretty swanky digs for a guy that's retiring, huh? Yeah, yeah. Like it must be rough. So we go on, and so we go on to this mission, and we have to do all this setup. And so Jack is going on and showcasing to Ethan this thing of gum, where there's a red side and then there's a green side, and if you kind of fold them together, you have 5 seconds before this gum explodes. And so Jack is reminding Ethan to not chew the gum, or he'll die. His head will explode. So Ethan's like, yeah, I get it. As Ethan, of course, was chewing gum anyways. So we also have Jack that is talking to Sarah and is eventually kind of setting up these glasses and also setting up the like the earpiece that eventually Sarah is going to have to like hear what's going on. And we of course have Jack who's kind of hitting on Sarah, and so eventually I guess that is to possibly lead to like Jack and Sarah maybe having a date together. But I think we go on and have Ethan that is telling Jack that the date from Sarah is off when they're on this mission. So we go on, and they've kind I think everything is kind of set up now. I think we can go on the mission. It feels like I have to get clearance before, like in my brain, I'm scrambling to think if there's anything left to go on and say before I get past this point. I think we're good. So we go on and we have Ethan, who's disguised as Senator Waltz, making his way into this embassy, this Prague embassy. So so Ethan, of course, is with Sarah, and so what happens is we go on and we have Sarah who is to spray when they get into this embassy the mark, so that way, of course, Hannah can know where exactly this guy is moving because she can adjust her glasses to eventually just spot exactly where Alexander is consistently shifting to. So we go on and we have Senator Waltz and Sarah who go to get clearance from these sergeants, and we go on and we have Ethan that's asking the sergeant. It's like, well, hey sir, like why aren't you like, hey sergeant, why aren't you wearing like your like military like attire? And the guy's like, well, because they were to tell us that we need to be more like discreet. And the senator's like, oh, okay. So I guess to kind of give that guy like a little bit of extra line, so because like a lot of times a lot of extras like they don't get to say anything, and so I guess it's nice to just kind of like, hey, like can I just kind of throw a line your way and kind of you improvise, and like they could cut it but maybe they'll use it. So anyways, so but it's kind of nice, but maybe there is a time where this was actually scripted in the film, but it's whatever. So the senator is to go through this elevator. Of course, Jack is to go on and be on top of this elevator because he is to go on and set up certain like tech pieces and stuff to eventually hack through this environment. He was to go on and hack his way into this embassy's computer system to clear both the senator, who is Ethan, and Sarah for all of their paperwork and their licenses and everything like that, their badges to say that they are who they say they are. So, and we also have Ethan and Sarah who are to complain how Jack is always late. And that Ethan goes into this story about wanting to go on and just ride Jack until like he'll eventually not be late anymore. Like some weird goofy story about Ethan wanting to get even with Jack. So we go on and we have Ethan and Sarah making it through this elevator, and so they go on to this room where the knock list is to be located. And so we have Sarah who's adjusting these glasses so that way they can see right to the computer. Because the main mission here for them to go on and do was they want evidence that Alexander is going on and stealing the knock list, and they want to follow Alexander to find where it is that he's taking this knock list and follow not only him but the person that buys the list. And then after that they're going to go on and arrest both of them, either the buyer or Alexander himself. So we have both Ethan and Sarah left in this room, and so all of a sudden we have to where Alexander is to be coming into this elevator because Hannah is going on and telling them the location of where it seems that Alexander is heading to, the denied area. So we go on, and Jack, of course, is having problems opening the elevator doors, and so Jim has to come in and eventually open these elevator doors that doesn't have an elevator in it for both Ethan and Sarah to slip down into the bottom of this elevator shaft. So we have Ethan, we have Sarah that luckily have this this door leading them out of this elevator shaft to eventually make their way to this outside location where it seems that they're going to go on and be done with their mission, or that they're eventually going to transport their way out of there. And so we have Ethan and we have Sarah who are going on and eventually look like they're making out. So once we get to this point, we start to see this drunken couple that looks fairly suspicious, as well as eventually Ethan is to realize that there's a waiter by Hannah when she was going on and eventually kind of doing what she was doing that also looked suspicious, and eventually that will come into play later. So all of a sudden we start to have it where we at first have Jack, who is supposed to be done and is to try to get the heck out of there. All of a sudden, it seems that the elevator is to be lifting fairly quickly to the point where Jack is to supposedly cut the power, and instead he ends up cutting into himself, with him getting crushed here and killed. So all of a sudden, people are starting to get scared that all of a sudden there is to be one person down. So we go on and have it to where after Ethan and Sarah are kind of staying in this one position, realizing that now Alexander is on the move, we have it to where Jim is to get out of his position and is to eventually make his way across this bridge to hope that he can make it to where Alexander is. The sad part of that is we start to have Jim, who of course is to be shot supposedly, and then he is to have blood all over his body, and he ends up tipping over off this bridge and dies. Now having Ethan believe that now Jim is now dead. So because if anybody's to go on and see this movie, you'll know what happens with certain people within this film. There's probably a reason why I'm mentioning Jim here consistently. Jim, Jim, Jim. Bada bim. Anyways, moving on. So we have it to where Claire is in this vehicle, but then she decides to get out. We end up having Hannah that is to go on into this car and kind of wait for everyone else. So all of a sudden, Ethan is to eventually rush his way to go on and eventually like do his own thing, while Sarah is still following after Alexander. And so when Ethan is to make his way to where this car is, all of a sudden the car explodes with Hannah in it, and then Ethan is to make his way to where Jim fell, and there of course was nothing Ethan can do because Jim is already gone. So Ethan then rushes back to Sarah, realizing that Sarah is in danger because everyone else is probably going to die on his team. So, not realizing that Claire is still alive. So, we have it where Ethan rushes to find where Sarah is, to find that both Alexander and now Sarah are both dead via a knife wound. We have it to where Ethan is to pull the knife out of Sarah, realizing that this is a fairly unique blade that hopefully at some point he probably won't see again at some point, right? So we go on and we have Ethan, who is to check the body of Alexander to realize that the knock list is gone. It's out in the open. So now Ethan is to go on and call from a payphone, Kittredge, and tell Kittredge that his whole team is dead, that everyone is dead and he's the only one left. And so we have it to where Kittredge is like, well, okay, like I'll be at this restaurant within 1 hour, like meet me there, and eventually we'll kind of debrief you and talk what's next. So Ethan, of course, is to go to this restaurant, and he's just kind of confused why exactly like Kittredge has like been in this location, as if like he just kind of been waiting for this to eventually happen. So we have Ethan that makes it to this restaurant, and so we have, of course, where Kittredge is to give Ethan this passport, and is telling him, it's like, okay, well, I guess like you're on your way out of here. Go on and eventually kind of rattle off some people that are eventually uh, be some guys that you can kind of leave suspicion on if you catch my drift. So we have it to where Ethan is to go on and say it's like, well, why was there another team sent? Kittredge is like, what are you talking about? And so he starts rattling off every single person that he had previously seen within his mission that is also in this same room. He goes on and he mentions that the drunk couple is within this restaurant and that the waiter behind Hannah is also to be in this restaurant also. So why was there another team sent? And so Kittredge was to go on and eventually mention it's like, well, hey, like, I'm sorry about your team dying. I know Jim was very uh, like special to you, not only professionally but personally, and that like also uh, he is to go on and mention about uh, like we've lost too many agents tonight, and Ethan's like, well, like you mean I've lost a number of agents tonight? And Kittredge is like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, there's no one else to blame but me because everyone else is dead. And Kittredge is like, well, yeah, you're right about that. So we have Kittredge that is to reveal to Ethan that it seems that there was a mole within this team of Ethan's, and they were trying to figure it out. This whole mission was to be a mole hunt, and that knock list isn't the real knock list, and the real knock list is in Langley headquarters, and this whole mission that caused so much death was to just find a mole within this team. And so, since Ethan is the only one left alive, they naturally assume that it's Ethan because it makes the most sense of him being the only one that's really alive here. So, Ethan is realizing what Kittredge is saying here, and so he goes on and he is to red light, green light, put this gum together, slap it upon this fish tank, and then is to run off, realizing that he needs to go on and find out who Max is and find out what job 314 is, as Kittredge is to go on and mention that, while he is to go on and tell Ethan about this intel about this whole mission. So, as well as supposedly Ethan getting a huge deposit within his bank account that is to be very suspicious to go on and think that Ethan is to be somehow attached to this, which he, of course, isn't. So, Ethan is to make it his way out of this restaurant, realizing that he needs to go on and make it back to the place, of course, where uh, Jim was to tell him, hey, at 400, everyone meets back here and we'll go our separate ways. So we have Ethan making it back to this apartment, and so he takes this light bulb, crushes it, and is to display all the pieces so that way if anybody is to go on and walk down this hallway, he can hear the crinkling of this light bulb and he could tell like, okay, somebody's trying to get to this room. So we go on and we have Ethan who is to go on and eventually try to put pieces together through the internet, trying to like figure out like who is Max. Like, could there be a Max.com? Could we go on and like how can I figure out job or job 314? Like, what is this? Like, what could this really mean? How could I figure this out? And all of a sudden, we have Ethan, who eventually is to look at the Holy Bible and it's like, oh, Job 3:14. So we go on and we have Ethan who goes and thumbs through this Bible, and so I guess the passage is to go on and mention about all of these kings and councilmen who are to go on and eventually uh, have places that had gone to ruin, and so Ethan, of course, is going on to seemingly every single bit of internet thing that is to have some religious connection and reach out and message some person named Max and say that they are Job, and is to go on and kind of cryptically deliver all these messages. And so we have Ethan doing that for a number of hours, and it seems like he hasn't slept in days. And so all of a sudden, we go on and we have Claire, who is to slowly but surely make her way into Ethan's place because no one else is really alive. So Ethan, I guess, is to be so exhausted, so tired. Instead of him seeing Claire, he's seeing Jim. And so we have Ethan who is seeing Jim, and Jim is going on and saying, Ethan, like, how could you not have come back for me, Ethan? Like, kind of this, like, guilt trip and pity and whatever. But then all of a sudden, Ethan is to realize that this is actually Claire, and so now Ethan is to think that Claire is after him, and so he's trying to like search her body for any kind of like wires or anything like that, anything that would go on and have it be like a weapon that like she's gonna come in and try to kill Ethan. So, but like we have it, of course, where Ethan is to tell Claire, it's like, well, hey, if you're not dead, then you're with me, and eventually, like, we're gonna have to work together. Um, so we go on, and I think we have Claire and we have Ethan who are to get some sleep, and then decide what their next plan is. So they go on and they have it, of course, where Ethan is to get this email from Max. And so we have it where Max is to give this message to Ethan mentioning that he needs to go to this certain location by 1 p.m. and is to go to this certain man and ask him for a match. So Ethan is to make his way to this location, ask this guy for this match. We have a car that drives up, and so Ethan is to be put in this ski mask with tape on it, and is like every hole is to be sewn so he won't be able to see where he's going. So, all while Ethan is wearing this hat. So, Ethan is to make it to this location, this undisclosed location, and is to go on and talk to Max. And so, we have it to where Ethan is to want to take the ski mask off so he can just kind of talk to Max. So, they're going on and like, well, like if Max doesn't like what you have to tell her, then you're going to go on and you're going to eventually like die here. It's like, well, like Max is like, well, I don't think I have any, or Ethan is to go on and say like, well, I don't really have much of anything to lose. So we have Ethan that's going on and telling Max that the knock list that she has is to be useless, that eventually when she puts it in the computer, that in within 2 minutes, the Kittredge and the MI5 guys are to be coming in to try and get to them. So we have it, of course, where Max doesn't believe Ethan and doesn't believe that Ethan is Job. Because, of course, Job doesn't say a number of cryptic things like Ethan did. So, but we also have it where at some point we have we have Job that went on and eventually was to say kind of cryptic like things, because of course he had to have the Bible handy to eventually go on and like put all these messages out. So, anyways, we have it to where, of course, Max is to go on and uh, try to get the knock list, and we of course have these agents that come through, and so Max is to immediately believe Ethan, as Ethan is to want $150,000 so he can put a mission together to get the real knock list. And so we have, of course, where Max is to believe Ethan, give him the money that he needs. So Ethan is then to turn around and hire a couple of men from the disemboweled list so he can go on and put together this mission in Langley, where we start to get the mission where Ethan Hunt is to be dangling, and he, of course, to go through this room that is to have it be like if there's a 1% temperature change, or if there's a 1.0% temperature change, or if there is to be like something as small as a thing of sweat that drops onto the ground of this room, this heavily secured room, that an alarm will go off, that you would have to go into the room and talk of anything higher than a whisper. Then eventually, like security will be eventually uh, like kind of called and everything like that. So there, so Ethan is going on and telling a guy named Kruger and Luther that they're going on and doing this mission. And Luther is like, man, if we're going to have to do this mission, like, we're going to have some substantial tech, and I keep the tech at the end of this, right? And Ethan's like, well, of course you will. So we go on and we have these guys that are kind of skeptical about this whole mission. We have uh, Kruger that is kind of saying, it's like, well, I think I need 24 hours to like kind of put pieces together of what all we'll need. And we go on and we have, of course, where Ethan is saying that Claire was to have some intel on Luther, saying like this will probably be a piece of cake for a guy who is to go on and in his past go on and have this be like for his mission, for this mission, be the mother of all hacks. So Luther is going on to like, well, like, I didn't really do that mission, that fine piece of work that I had gone on and done. So we have both of these guys who are in, and so we go on and make our way to Langley, as we of course are to kind of keep this CIA analyst William Donnelly. We have Claire, who's consistently keeping this guy uh, either drugged or eventually just kind of keeping an eye on him, as well as we have it to where Luther is to eventually get a marker on William to say like where he's going, so these guys know when to eventually like be at the computer and when they should be kind of high up in the rafters or high up in the sky, so that way William won't go on and see where these guys are. So, and we had Ethan that is to go on and tell both these guys like what like tech Langley has for William Donlow to have to go through all these like retinal scans and all these cue card or all these like key cards and Ethan is saying like, well, yeah, like that's a lot of stuff that we won't have and we won't need. So, but anyways, let's backpedal. So we go on and have a fire alarm supposedly being set somewhere in Langley, supposedly section 21, and so Ethan and Krieger are eventually going to be the main two firefighters, as Claire is to slip off into this other room, and she's going to eventually change into these dress clothes and then just follow the CIA agent William around. So we have it where Ethan and Krieger are to make it into this one room, and we of course have this police officer that's kind of, or this security guard that's kind of looking around, and then when he is to go back into the room with the firefighters, realizing that there's no smoke there, there's no fire, and we have Kittredge that is also in Langley, realizing that there's some fire alarm going on. He's like, well, should we evacuate? And they're like, no, like I think it'll just resolve itself. So we go on and have the security guard making it back into the room with both Ethan and Krieger, and is saying like, "Hey, weren't there three of you guys?" And so all of a sudden we have it to where, of course, Ethan is to knock this fireman out, and Krieger is wanting to kill this guy, but Ethan's like, "Hey, we're not gonna have a body count here," and Krieger is like, "We'll see." So both Ethan and Krieger are to go through this ventilation shaft and are to eventually make their way to the room where they are to have Krieger kind of rope Ethan down. So we go on and have William, who makes his way through this room and is going through all the security and then is putting in all his passwords and security and all that stuff. So, and then is to realize that he is eventually going to get sick. Because what is going to happen is we have Claire, who is to find William as he's in his lunch and he's drinking some coffee. Claire is to pour this thing from her pen into William's coffee, making him start to feel ill, start to Ralph barf, vomit. So we have William who barfs into this trash can, then leaves this room, and then is to go on consistently into this bathroom and start just Ralphing away. So we go on and then have it to where these guys are to download this information, are to take these discs and take and copy all this information, and then skedaddle out of there. After they are to go on and have Krieger, who is to find a rat in this ventilation shaft, and so Krieger is to have to kill this rat so the rat doesn't make any noise, because Ethan is to tell Krieger it's like from here on out, like we need to be silent, because Ethan is to like analyze like how high of a voice tone that they need to have. So, because Krieger, of course, is to sneeze, and that is to really just be a very loud sound. So Ethan goes on and, of course, is to now almost be like touching the ground, because Krieger, once he was to kill this cat, he lets loose of this rope, and we now have Ethan that is kind of dangling in like right next to the ground, desperately trying not to sweat because his sweat will drop onto the ground and alarms will sound. So we go on and we have Krieger that is to go on and regain this rope and trying to haul Ethan right back up, uh, to eventually have them escape this. Ethan is to go on and take the discs that he needs, and is to go on and take all of this equipment that he had. So Ethan is to then get out of here. We have it to where, of course, he is to release all these like smoke grenades, and eventually another alarm goes off because now we have it to where William is in this room where all of a sudden this knife had fell, and he's like, okay, this is weird. So we go on, and now all that is done. We have all these firemen that end up escaping from Langley, and we have Kittredge that is to go on and tell these this other Frank Barnes to go on and have William just be like sent off to Alaska somewhere, and eventually have his clothes being mailed out to him. So I thought that was kind of funny. So now we go on and we have the guys with the knock list, and so we of course have it where Ethan is to have supposedly handed Krieger the knock list, but then Ethan's like, no, I don't have the knock list, or you don't have the knock list, I do. Because he goes on and Ethan is to consistently do these magic tricks where it's to disappear and then he's to have it in his back pocket, or eventually Claire has it in her back pocket and just like, hey, like the disc could be anywhere. Like, so Ethan is telling Krieger, do you really think that I gave you the list? And Krieger is like, well, hey, whatever you do, don't mess with my money. Because Ethan is wanting to go on and be at the meeting where, of course, Ethan is to go on and do this kind of money exchange. And Ethan is to want to go on and talk to Max and eventually, like, assure that Job is going to show up at this meeting, and that also he's going to get $10 million for this list, and so on and so forth. So which $10 million, I kind of looked at like the way that they did like the $10 million thing. It just feels like this random thing that doesn't look like really like $10 million. It just looks like this weird, goofy like thing that I guess is to just be this thing of paper that looks like fake money. It doesn't make sense. But so I that was the one thing that didn't really like. I was like, what the is this? Anyways, so we go on, and so Max is going to meet at in this train, and Job will be present, and so now we're kind of like towards like the end of the movie here, which I'm like good because I'm like I don't know how many things that I could probably f up or mess up when we get closer and closer towards the end. So come to find out, Kittredge is to go on and arrest Ethan's mother and father, so that way Ethan will possibly come out of hiding. So Ethan is going on and calling Kittredge and talking to him, and so Kittredge is trying to keep Ethan on the line long enough to figure out where exactly he is, and Ethan is to showcase that he's in England, and then he hangs up with the phone. So while Ethan all of a sudden is to hang up with his phone, all of a sudden Jim Phelps is right there next to him. So Jim, I guess, is to be injured. We go on and see that Jim has some arm injury. So we go on, and we also had a point after uh, Krieger was to go on and throw away the list, and Ethan is to grab that disc because Krieger is was to have the knock list after all. Ethan was to pick up the Bible, realizing that this Bible was from the Drake Hotel from Chicago. Having Ethan realize that possibly Jim needed a book the whole entire time because he was Job. And so Ethan going on and talking to Jim was to go on and say that all of this was Kittredge, and Kittredge was the mole. And Ethan is going on and saying, like, why would it be Kittredge? This doesn't make at all any kind of sense for him to want to do this kind of payout. So instead, we have Ethan in his brain figure out that Jim did all of this and that Jim would have wanted this money, and it would make all the sense in the world for Jim to go off and kill everybody. So Ethan is going on and timing exactly how Jim killed everyone, even to the point of making it look like Jim killed himself. So, and plus also Jim was to be dunked out of this, or to swim out of this water to then put the detonator on the bomb to kill off Hannah, and for Jim to use his tech to kill off Jack. And we had it to where Ethan was possibly thinking that Claire had possibly killed Anna, but no, that's not the case. But also that Ethan was thinking that possibly whoever Job was needed help, and so Job hired Krieger, who of course had the exact same knife when Krieger was to go on and kill Sarah, as Krieger did when Ethan was with him via that whole mission that they were in Langley. So we have it to where Ethan has now put everything together, and so now we have it to where like Ethan is saying like, oh yeah, Jim, like yeah, like we're gonna try to get Kittredge on all this. We're gonna figure this all out. So as well as we have it to where like Ethan is asking like Jim, it's like, well, why could Kittredge do something like this? And so like Jim is rattling off all these reasons, a poor marriage, this and that. So to just try and probably justify that Jim could possibly be the one who has done all this, and probably know a number of people that eventually would lead uh, Ethan to think even more that Jim is like, yeah, this is the guy. Like he knows all the people that Kittredge could have really went to, but it's really Jim this whole time. So we go on, and so Ethan is to have to figure out one more piece of the puzzle here. So we have, of course, where Ethan is to make his way onto this train, and we have Kittredge who is slowly behind him because Ethan is to give 2 tickets to this uh, this train, and is to give them a watch. So we have Kittredge who's realized like, okay, we have like 10 minutes of time to get on this train. So Max is to go on and be on this train, and so we end up having it, of course, where uh, we have it where Ethan is to go on and give Max the knock list, and so she is to tell Ethan that the money is to be in a specific part of the train. So Ethan, of course, is to supposedly go there, and we all of a sudden have Claire who's also going to that location before Ethan does, and so we have it to where Jim Phelps is supposedly there in the room talking to Claire, and so Claire is mentioning how they can turn this all around and pinpoint this on Ethan rather than pinpointing it on Jim, and that Jim is really Job, and so Claire is wanting to pin this all on Ethan, and so we have it where Jim is to take off his mask and realize that this is really Ethan, And Ethan's like, well, you know what, Claire, like, I'm really sorry that you said that. So all of a sudden we find out that Jim is to really be in this room, and he is to have all of this, like this kind of uh, like boombox that he converts into this gun, and is to have all this like this gear on, getting ready for him to have to go on and climb his way on the top of this train so he can make his way to this getaway after he gets this $10 million on this helicopter. So, really saying that Jim was not going to leave with Claire, he was going to kill her off. And so Jim goes on and shoots Claire, and now Ethan is to check on Claire here, who of course is dead. So we have it to where, of course, Jim is mentioning to Ethan, it's like, well, yeah, I'm sure, like, you tested the goods on Claire, because, like, I sure did. So, mentioning that Jim was just using Claire, so that's kind of sad. But we have it at points where Claire was to apologize for Kruger, and Ethan's like, well, hey, like what can you do when we have to hire these kind of people? But then also Ethan is to have Claire hold on to his hand, and like she is to kind of kiss his hand and so on and so forth. So, but anyways, so Claire is to die, Ethan is to realize that she is dead, and then he has to go on and chase after Jim, who is to be making his way on this helicopter that is manned by Krieger. So we have Ethan that is now chasing after Jim, as well as putting on a pair of glasses to showcase to Kittredge that Jim is still alive. So that way, a number of people besides know that Jim is still alive. And so, if Kittredge was like, "Oh, good morning, Mr. Phelps," so we go on and we have Ethan chasing after Jim, and so this eventually leads to Ethan trying to take this little hook thing that uh, the helicopter is to be possibly going to tie itself to Jim, and instead we have Ethan who's to take this hook and latch it onto the train, forcing Krieger to now have to dive this helicopter into this tunnel. And so now we go on and have this very tight spot that Krieger is in, with this helicopter, to the point where there's another train coming. Krieger has to figure out a way to kind of fit in this area. So we just have Phelps, who is to jump from the train to this helicopter, to like the kind of the arm of the helicopter. And so Ethan goes on and jumps also onto this helicopter, and is to take out the stick of gum, and is like, red light, green light, and he puts it together and slaps it onto the helicopter, and then he jumps from the helicopter to then the train. And so Jim is to now have to go on and just kind of fall to his death. And we have it, of course, where the helicopter is coming ever so closer to where Ethan is. And so this helicopter just stops almost dead, uh, to get very close to Ethan, to where it almost kind of cuts him at some point. So Ethan, after this, is to get resolved of all of his charges, as Kittredge is to go on and find out Max and arrest her, as we have it to where Luther was trying to delay Max getting this transfer of this Noclus so she can go on and eventually have it get out there. So we have it to where Kittredge is going and tell Max, is like, well, hey, I don't think we're going to need the court system to arrest you or anything like that. And so Max is going on and saying, like, well, there has to be something that I can bribe you with. And Kittredge is like, no. So we go on, and now all the dust is settled. We have both Luther and we have both Ethan that are only two left of this team. And so now Ethan's name is cleared, and so is the name of his parents. And eventually Luther is asking Ethan, it's like, well, how did your parents feel after that whole incident? And we go on and we of course have Ethan's like, well, like you know what, none of this really like made sense to them. And eventually uh once the other like police just kind of figure things out, like they kind of resolve them of all charges. So we go on and we have, I guess, Luther that is out of the disavowed list, or the list that you are to eventually get blacklisted from. So we have Ethan that's asking Luther, it's like, well, how does it feel? And Luther is like, well, like I liked being disreputable. And so Ethan's like, well, like when it comes down to it, I'll always think of you that way. And Luther's like, oh, well, that's great. So we'll go on, and eventually we'll have Ethan that is consistently coming to Luther, and eventually, like the two of them are going to be tied together through a rest of these Mission Impossible movies, and eventually they'll just keep adding people along the way. They'll end up adding Simon Pegg. They'll eventually add Henry Cavill, and so on and so forth. This movie, as well as guys like Jeremy Renner and just a number of hodgepodge people that eventually they'll just keep adding through these movies, to the point of us just having a number of cluster of team of whatever for Ethan to be working with. But other than that, I think I'm going to finally get the heck out of here. Hopefully I went on and said most of what all happened here, because I am just going to get out. Because without a doubt, this was an hour and holy crap, almost an hour and 7 minutes, and this is an hour and 50 minutes. Man, these reviews are to be longer than I would like them to be, but it is what it is. Especially with all the information of which that I have to spew out at points. Let me know in the comments below if I forgot a million things within this review, because I'm sure I did. I'm sure there's a lot of details that I overly simplified instead of going into a complex approach of whichever. So yeah, like I might have even gave some stuff away, but when really looking at it, this movie has been out for a number of decades. And so also I might have screwed up at some point because I'm very tired and I probably want to call it a day. So with that said, I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.